Okay, welcome back to Principles of Political Science. As we transition in from having looked at the basic concepts and ideas of political science, politics, what it is, how we study it, the basic introduction to the concepts, ideas, and ideologies that underlie political science and looking at society generally, we're transitioning into looking specifically at the American political system, structure of government, by first taking a look at a few speeches that exemplify both how we've evolved as a society in the United States, but also emphasize key elements, key time periods in American democratic and institutional evolution before World War, during World War II, during the Civil Rights era, during the Cold War, and then a very contested presidential election in recent time. And what I want you to think about when you watch these brief but historically enormously significant speeches, the content of which have been dissected, analyzed, commented on, written on extensively throughout the last century, since the first of the four speeches that you have to watch by Roosevelt. Think about how do they reflect the ideas of democracy? How do they reflect the ideals that we hold in American society? How do they reflect the evolution of American society, the values we hold, the principles we hold dear? How do they exemplify the evolution of democracy, of values of equality, of our perception of ourselves? There are certain themes that run through all four that you will find very clearly, and sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, but clearly shining through all of these speeches. The values, ideals that we uphold as a society, even though we've been imperfect at it at times, even though you can make a strong case that we were not a consolidated democracy with equality under the rule of law until the late 1960s, after the Civil Rights period and the changing of those unjust laws in the South put in place during the Democratic Party's rule of the South, and then we transition into a more consolidated and exemplary democracy. We still have problems. We still have immense problems. We have a lot of debates on the same general issues: what role for the government, what role for the people, how large should government be, what should it do, as we did 230 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. But think about this when you look and when you listen to the speeches. How do the values that we purport to hold come through? What's the emphasis on in the speeches? How is this perception of what America stands for exemplified in these speeches that come at different time periods during different crises, directed at slightly different particular crises, but they have these constant themes shining through that I want you to think about. What does this tell us about America as a society? How have we evolved, yet try to stay true to certain principles that are exemplified in these speeches? And when you've listened to these speeches, think about, how do you see us handling crisis? How do our leaders, both elected leaders like presidents and civil rights leaders, unelected civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King, how do they exemplify those values and norms that we hold dear? And how have these helped shape society as we see it today? And is there something called an American dream alive today still in society? Is there a particular American dream, American hope and aspirations that encompasses these ideals and something else that makes us unique? Is it still there? Because even though you may not have heard about the American dream as a concept, it is a big idea, a big area of research in American political development. And you'll also hear various hints at, both directly and indirectly, in all of these speeches, pertaining to the elements that go into the American dream, that at its heart have this notion that every generation should be better off than the previous generation by hard work, following the norms and structures of society, but following your dreams at the same time, working hard, excelling, and prospering to a greater extent than your parents. This exuberant optimism, as Thomas Friedman once called it, does it really still exist? If so, how? How is it exemplified also in these speeches that you have to watch? And how do you think of the American dream? Because while it is a concept that has certain definition, a certain general definition associated with it, it is also very much an individualized dream. How is that exemplified today? What do you see it as meaning? And discuss that with the rest of the class. And so next week, when we look at more specifically American institutions and organizations, there are no abridged versions of the lectures. These are full lectures. For the weeks, we look particularly at the institutions and structures and evolution of American constitutionalism, the Congress, the presidency, and the judiciary. So keep that in mind as you go forward. Thanks.